Live from Schorr Manor Studios, this is Tales from a Small Town Journalist with Matt Schorr.
Hey guys, thanks for checking out this episode of Tales from a Small Town Journalist, the podcast dedicated to all the weird and wonderful stories you are only going to hear about from reporters working in small communities just like yours. I'm Matt Schorr, and I was a small town reporter for almost 10 years before I finally hung up my notepad and my camera. And in that time, I got to have some interesting experiences with the public, and I got to know a lot of other people in the field who also had some unique experiences working with the public. Before I go any further, I do want to make sure and mention that this is a listener-supported podcast supported by wonderful folks just like you. There are some great ways that you could show us some support. First and foremost would be to go visit my website, www.mattschorr.net. Check out the shop section and visit a few of our online stores and show us some financial love. We've got some of my comics, we've got my books, and we also have a new line of spooky t-shirts designed by my wife and yours truly. So go check all that out. We would really appreciate any support you can throw behind us. It'd be fantastic. Another great way, though, that you can social support is to just spread the word. You know, if you can't show some financial love, we can all recommend something to a friend, right? So, use whatever sort of social media you have at your disposal. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Snapchat, whatever the kids these days are using that I'm too old to understand. Use those to tell people about this goofy little podcast, its goofy hosts, and the goofy stories that they like to tell. This episode is going to be a first. Definitely a first, both for this podcast and for me, because normally I've interviewed one person at a time, but this time I got to interview two people, count them, two people at the same time. So no pressure, but I feel like I managed pretty good. I was chatting with the co-hosts of the Nerd Up podcast, a podcast that I'm a pretty big fan of. So I'll give them a cheap plug here. So go check that one out if you're into comic books, pop culture, or anything nerdy. It's a great show to check out. It's upbeat, it's positive, and it's fun. Its hosts are Gil T. Wilson and Tony Collins. And it was a real treat chatting with them because in addition to being podcasters, they're also radio personalities for their hometown. As I was coming up in the newspaper industry, there was this sort of mentality that radio is and newspapers are sort of the enemy. But I think in our case, we all had this sort of stronger animosity toward television. So it became sort of this, the enemy of my enemy is my friend scenarios. And so a lot of times I would go out and cover events, often sharing a car or anything with the local radio guys, and they would welcome me aboard as well because there were several times that because we were more connected to the community sometimes than the television folks were, that we would get in there first and almost sort of scoop them, if you will. But anyway, it's always fun to chat with some folks in radio. I don't get to do it very often. Most of the times I chat with people who do like I did, worked in newspapers, but it's radio is a field that I've always found fascinating. It's unique in so many ways. It's so unlike any type of media out there because it's purely audio and because it never stops. I know that television at this point can go 24 hours, but radio was doing it long before then. Television would quit broadcasting at midnight, but radio just keeps right on going. So they're constantly feeding that medium to keep the word going out. So you don't get into it unless you love it. And these two guys, they definitely loved it. And it was great chatting with them both about radio, about their podcasts, about their interests, and hearing some of the fun stories that they've got. They've got some good ones. So I'll stop wasting time, shift gears right now, and go talk to and go talk to Gil and Tony. This episode is brought to you by Moby Dick Back from the Deep, the webcomic chronicling the white whale's return in modern times as a zombified beast. This terrifying high seas adventure boasts more than 78,000 viewers, 4 successful Kickstarter campaigns, and numerous mentions on comic book and horror podcasts, e-zines, and more. Check out this monstrous tale at backfromthedeep.com if you dare. Okay, I'm joined by Tony Collins and Gil T. Wilson from WTYE Radio and the Nerd Up podcast, one of my favorite podcasts out there. And Gil has asked to also be identified as the supreme ruler of all.
Yeah, I think so.
Want to make sure that I get that in there. So first off, thanks so much, guys, for joining me. This is going to be a unique exercise for me. First time interviewing two people.
Well, we'll try to talk over each other as much as possible.
Absolutely. Gil and I are sitting in the same room together, and we have a habit of talking over one another. and we talked that it's going to be a unique experience for us as well. Usually we're the ones doing the interviewing, so the idea of being interviewed is a little odd.
Well, it's going to be, this will be interesting for everybody all around. It's a virgin voyage for us all, I guess.
Right.
Must be the first time since I've had one of those in a while.
So it's not often I get to chat with folks in radio. Most of the time I talk to people who have done work in newspapers, and every once in a while somebody in television, but radio, I don't get to do very much, which is odd since I have a podcast. You'd think they would gravitate toward that, but radio is such a unique animal when it regard to journalism as broadcast and everything. So with that, it lends itself, I think, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but some really interesting experiences for the people in that industry. Am I right?
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think even more so sometimes in the smaller markets.
Yeah.
Because we wear so many different hats. So we're responsible for so many different things that it kind of double and quadruples the number of oddball people we talk to.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, one of the things about, again, small town radio is that Tony and I, we're the only ones here most of the time. He's here in the mornings, I'm here in the afternoons. If something happens, we're here to fix it, whether we like it or not. So yeah. Even if we can't.
Yeah, even unless it's like today when our transmitter broke.
Yeah.
Then we have to send up the SOS and call our engineer.
Yeah. But yeah,
I can relate to that.
Yeah, with the mini hats, it's amazing. Like we once in a while, a person from our parent company, they'll say, "Hey, I got these tickets to give away. You guys want to do it?" Sure, yeah, we'll do it. Okay, figure out how to do it. Okay, yeah. So now we become promotions people.
Yeah. Oh, when's the concert? Tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah. That's
all right. Sure.
Thanks for the heads up.
So let's talk about how you guys got into this industry. Gil has told his story to me once before, but it's been a while. So why don't we go ahead and hear your story again? And then, I definitely want to hear Tony's story about how he got into the unique business that is radio.
Well, when I was about 8 months old, I was left at the step of a radio station. And no. But basically, you know what? All through my life, I loved music. Never could play an instrument. And I just love music. And I knew I wanted to be a part of it. And as I got into high school, I thought, radio, that's pretty cool. Those guys are fun to listen to. And back then, this was when radio guys were king. This is the radio star was the radio star. People in town, here it's a small town, so everybody kind of knows us, but it's not quite the same, And so I went to Kansas City for a while, and that right there, you just fall into it. It's like, oh, you work in radio? What radio station? There's like 50 of them. So, it's like rolling the dice of whether they even listen to you or not. So you never know what's going to happen. You just never know. And I said, well, I'm in this for the long haul. So after high school, I went into the Navy. And in the Navy, I volunteered for Armed Forces Radio Network. And I found out, that's definitely what I want to do. Got out, went to college, and just started pursuing the career. And again, it's just because I love music, love listening to it, love playing it, not instrument wise, but love playing it on a CD player, which I can play the crap out of that. And then, or MP3 player or anything else. And then also the fact that I have I don't know how many terabytes of useless knowledge in my head that, what else am I going to do with it but talk on the air, tell people.
Exactly.
So, I was destined to do this. And then actually there was one point where I tried to get out of radio, and I got out for about 6 months, and I was like, no, it's in my blood. I got to get back there. I don't know how to do anything else.
Like The Godfather.
Yeah.
You thought you were out and they pulled you back in.
Exactly. So here I am.
As long as your offspring doesn't get killed off to keep you in.
Right? Yeah. Well, actually, it's a funny story. My son just, well, he's in his junior year in college, and he's studying to be a voice actor. Well, he's also he works at the campus radio station, and as a part-time job. And so I'm like, oh, he's following in my footsteps. It's cute.
No, really, I have warned both my children not to do it.
Well, after he started doing that, I said, you're not going to get rich, right? You could become a doctor.
Yeah, my dad would be a chiropractor.
So. No.
I can relate to that. Somebody once asked me what advice I would give to budding young writers looking to break into that avenue. And my first answer was, don't do it.
Don't
find something else.
Yeah. I can see it. Well, same with radio. Like, don't.
So Tony, how did you get into this business?
It was oddly enough a trip to the circus. Oddly or appropriately enough, I don't know. My family and I, we went to the circus, and the ring announcer was out there doing his stick, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey. And I started mimicking him in the stands. And my mom went, wow, you've got a good voice. You should look at doing that. So rather than actually running away with the circus, I got into radio, which is basically the same thing.
Not much difference. I mean,
different clowns, but
same amount of poop to clean up.
Yeah, basically. So my story doesn't have nearly as many steps necessarily as Gil's does, but very much in the same vein. I'm lazy. I was gonna talk to myself anyway. I love music, so I may as well get paid to do it. And here I am.
Wait, you get paid?
Oh, well, slightly reimbursed. But I graduated high school, and I went to a 2-year community college in the area, Wabash Valley College in Mount Carmel, Illinois. Took their 2-year broadcasting program. And I tell everybody the thing that is most valuable for me beyond the education, or in lieu of the education, was the fact that my schedule just happened to work out such that I was on the air at the college's 50,000 watt radio station within about a week of starting the program. So I kind of hit the ground running. Now, that first show I didn't speak at all. I was just happy to spend 2 hours and keep the damn station on the air.
Yep.
And then, you kind of get more comfortable, and you grow into it after that. There are still days where I go, I cannot believe they pay me to do this. Again, I didn't get paid.
Really?
Sorry, Gil.
Man. I want to talk to somebody.
So tell me, well, like we mentioned earlier, there's got to be some really unique oddball experiences that come with working in radio, as unique as it is. So that's what I really want to dig into and hear whatever kind of goofball stories you guys might have from the times you've been, as long as you guys have been doing this.
All right. Well,
wow.
I gotta jump in here because I've got the perfect story, I think, for this. On air as a DJ, again, small market radio station, we all wear different hats. We do multiple jobs. So I am the news and sports director here at the radio station, and I'm also the morning show DJ. And when I first started here, I dubbed myself Captain Radio. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, a big nerd. And in our on-air studio at the time, there were all of the meters and stuff and bright lights bouncing in the hum of a transmitter. And I made the joke on the air that I felt like I was on the bridge of the Enterprise. Hey, just call me Captain Radio. And then, you start using it enough, it sticks. And 20 years later, you can't get rid of it. But then when I do the news, I use my real name, Tony Collins. Well, my mother-in-law was out garage sailing one time, and this lovely older lady started talking to her about the radio station, and she said, oh, yeah, I really like Tony Collins, but I tell you what, I really can't stand that Captain Radio. That guy, and my mother-in-law had to kind of smile and go, oh, well, he's my son-in-law. And they're the same person. And it's not like when I do the news, I talk like this. And then when I'm on the radio, I talk like this. It's the same voice, but for whatever reason, this lovely lady did not put 2 and 2 together. So you end up getting things like that.
And you know what? It still happens. It's like that. You'll on Facebook or something like that. Captain Radio. If we tag you as Tony Collins, they're like, who's that guy?
Right.
So, well, yeah, it's Captain Radio. So
yeah.
Well, I don't have anything fun like that. No, because I don't have any cool nickname. Well, actually, my whole name just worked out for radio. Gil T. Wilson. So
yeah. How many people have you had to come up and ask you what you're guilty of?
Yeah. Oh, all the time. I get tired of it.
I think it's the perfect name for a professional wrestling villain.
Right? Yeah. Well, so here's how it started out. I got a job while I was in college at a news talk station down in Southern Illinois. And the station the owner, he says, all right, well, we need to get you an on-air name. And I said, well, what's the matter? I want to use my own name. I don't want to, I don't want to be one of those fake people. I said, I just Gil Wilson. He goes, no. He goes, you got 2 soft consonants right there in the middle. You need a hard consonant in the middle to break that up. How about Jack Smith? And I don't remember exactly what he said, but along those lines. And I'm like, no, I want my name. He goes, I said, well, how about this? I said, I got a middle initial T. That's a hard consonant. How about Gil T. Wilson? He goes, yeah, we'll do that. All right. So I went for like 2 years on the news talk station as Gil T. Wilson. Then I got a job at the college radio station, and I got the morning gig, and I got on the air, and I said, hey, this is Gil T. Wilson. I'll be your morning guy from here on out. Thanks for whoever the guy was before me. I said, thanks for holding my seat for me until I could properly get here. And so if you got any questions, give me a call. I'm Gil T. Wilson. Here's, and then I played the song. First call comes in. Gil T., I get it. And I'm like, oh, that is funny. Awesome. So I went with it. So I didn't catch it while I was doing the news. I was serious,
Right.
So now I know.
Now
and,
you know.
And I'm a history legend. No, maybe not. So yeah. So I mean that's. I mean, really, I think that's the weirdest thing that ever happened to me was someone pointing to me about my own name. But I don't know about you. Have you got any stalkers, Tony?
Not that I'm aware of.
You wouldn't consider Sunshine?
No, you know what? Maybe if she wasn't such a sweetheart, she would have freaked me out more. I interviewed, and I've been here at the station for 25 years, give or take, and probably 5 years into that tenure, I was doing a morning interview show, and a group of ladies from the VFW Women's Auxiliary came in, did the interview. One of the older ladies just sort of adopted me as a long lost son, and she would call every day to talk to me, ask how I was doing, ask about the family. She's bought me birthday presents and Christmas presents, and my wife loves to give me all kinds of hell about it because, and Sunshine recently passed away at the ripe young age of 101.
Mm-hmm.
So, even when she first started to stalk me, be my stalker, she was still in her 80s.
Yeah.
So my wife was okay with the 80-year-old.
You can flirt with her all you want, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, if it had been a hard-bodied 20-year-old, it probably would have been a much different conversation with my wife. But yeah, Sunshine was a sweetheart, and she was a huge fan of the radio station and a big supporter of everything we did. So probably textbook stalker, but a sweetheart.
Oh,
so she gets a pass.
Well, see, that's the reason I said that is I ended up getting 2 of them in my career. And that's one of you hear a lot of, especially big city DJs. In fact, there's a Fox News lady, Harris Faulkner. She started out on TV in Kansas City, and she developed a stalker. And so she had to leave. She had to leave the county or the state. I think she went to New York. I think so. But anyway, now she's on Fox News. So
great. You've just outed her. Thanks.
You could see her on TV.
Oh, all right.
But anyway, so while in Kansas City, I got a stalker, and it wasn't cool, but it wasn't a girl. So like, I got this guy. I used to have a blues show. We basically highlighted local blues artists, and I got the show, and the guy was a big blues fan, and he would call me up and say, "Hey, how about this? How about this?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, cool." Well, one day I came home and he's sitting on my doorstep, and I'm like, "Who are you?" And he told me his name, and I recognized his voice from the phone call conversation. I'm like, "How'd you find my house?" He goes, "Oh, I looked it up, man. Had to find you. And I could not shake him from there on out. Eventually, I did have to call the police, and they did keep him away. He never did anything violent, but it was just creepy, showing up in my house. And one time he was in the backyard, and I'm like, Dude,
Well,
I got my dogs back there. How do you do
and
that?
even in the best circumstances, that is one of the weirder things about what we do.
Yeah.
Because for us, it's a job. It's what we do. We come here, and again, I think to myself that I am sitting in a room, I'm talking to myself, and I'm playing music. For whatever reason, it rarely occurs to me that people are out there actually hearing the stuff that I'm saying.
And liking it.
Until later on, I'm out in the community and somebody goes, "Oh, I heard what you said this morning on the radio." And I have to go, "Oh God, what did I say? What did I do?" So then I'm going back in my head, everything I said, going, "All right, is this about to become a fight? Is this?" And I never know how to reply when someone goes, "Oh, I listened to you on the radio." You go, "Oh, thanks, that's really cool," or "Oh, I'm sorry."
My typical response is, "Oh, you're the one." So, yeah,
My
that's the thing
closest
about the listeners.
my closest experience there is I have a weekly column that I write, and if my wife ever happens to read it, sometimes we have to have a hard conversation.
Well,
Ah.
I will tell this story. I was on the air one time, and I was talking about pudding. Butterscotch pudding came up in the topic of conversation, and I don't remember what the article was. It was ranking, Americans' favorite pudding or something like that. And I made reference on the air that my wife really loves butterscotch pudding, but we have a hard time finding butterscotch pudding that isn't sugar-free because she doesn't want the sugar-free stuff.
Right.
I came home, didn't think twice about it, sitting on the couch playing video games when she came home from work carrying a couple of cases of butterscotch pudding.
She found it, I guess.
Because somebody who was listening heard me say that, knew where she worked, picked some up and took it to her.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I had to have the conversation where she walked through the door going, "What did you talk about at work today?"
Yep.
And so there's been a time or two where that has kind of bit me in the backside where I have to go, "I don't know."
Yeah. Even between Tony and I, we listen to each other's shows. And in fact, this morning you said, "Oh, the story you did the other day, you had me laughing." And I'm like, crap, which one? And I'm like, was it good? Was it bad? Are you going to report me to the company? And so it's like, oh yeah, okay. And that's the thing. That's 100%. That's the thing that makes it even worse is once we say it on the air, it's out of our brains. Okay. I don't remember it. In fact, we do the weather, we record weather forecasts and we'll have them like for the whole weekend. I'll record the whole weekend. Tony will get the other half of the weekend. Whatever the case is. My first thing when I get home, my wife, "What's the weather like going to be like this weekend?" I'm like, I have no idea because I don't remember the stuff. I'm done. I throw it out.
Well, and I don't know how it is as a print columnist, but when I'm recording or reporting the news on the air, I'm reading, but I'm not reading it for comprehension. Like I will read whole newscast, and not have any recollection what it was that I actually read because I'm not necessarily reading it for retention. I'm reading it for delivery.
Yeah.
And that's probably a horrible practice. Now, the local stuff I am more apt to remember because I actually wrote it. So I will have but I'll have somebody call up and ask about, "Hey, what was the phone number in that story you did about the State Department of Public Health?" I don't know. I did a story about the State Department of Public Health. I don't, let me check. So,
yeah. So that's an issue with radio guys is we just read and we don't comprehend what we're reading.
Yeah, it literally goes in my eyes and out my mouth.
Yeah.
Kind of similar for a columnist, I guess, in my case, because I write most of them at least a week in advance. Sometimes, depending on what my schedule is going to be, I'll actually write multiple ones in advance. So by the time one goes into print, I am already starting on the next week's. And so that's what's in my head when I do that. And someone will ask me, "Oh, I saw what you wrote today." And I'll be like, what was it? Am I in trouble? Do I need
right? Yeah.
So I need to get a shield.
Exactly. Is there gonna be a fight?
Because there I saw what you wrote today is what you wrote 2 weeks ago. So
yeah. Yep. So yeah. It's probably not quite the same with the content rolling out of you guys just on a almost minute by minute basis, but it's kind of similar, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the same goes with when they send commercials for us to record for the other stations. We'll record it, do all the production to it, send it back off to them. A week or so later, hey, do you remember that spot you did for me? No, I do not.
Yeah. Nope. Your 30-second commercial was one of about 50 I've produced this week. I have no recollection of it whatsoever.
I don't even know who you are. So yeah. So that's I guess it's a hazard of radio. And again, the Anchorman thing about the TV Anchorman Will Ferrell did it, where it's like he'll read whatever's on the prompter. I mean, that's pretty much what we do. We type up the news or whatever story I'm talking about. We'll type it up and just kind of, like you said, in through the eyes, out through the mouth. We're done.
Yeah, one of the things I learned early on about myself in this career is that I can either read a story or I can ad-lib a story, but I cannot read it and sound like I'm ad-libbing it, if that makes any sense. There's something about a disconnect in my brain trying to sound professional but relaxed and ad-libby too. I can look at it and then just talk about it, and that's fine. Or I can read it and I sound like I'm doing. Now, the problem is, and I've got a new granddaughter. My fear is when I start reading her books, I'm still going to read the books like this. And Green Eggs and Ham is going to have an entirely different feel for it because this is how I read when I'm doing the news.
My son loved Go Dog Go when I read it to him. In fact, up until he was like 6 years old, I still had to read that book to him over and over because the way I performed it.
That's right. You got to do the voices.
That's right.
Like Robin Williams. Well, I do voices.
Yep.
I have to ask, you mentioned Will Ferrell and Ron Burgundy. Has there ever been a time that you were reading the copy and there was a question mark out of place and you read what was a statement and your voice kind of rose an octave at the end? Like, I'm guilty?
Yeah. I absolutely have been, and more so in commercials, I think. Some of our salespeople are, and I think it is across the board a lot of times. Sales reps are great sales reps, but they're not necessarily great copywriters. And they don't necessarily understand what a comma means to me as the person reading it. So a comma means take a breath, wait a beat. It creates a certain inflection in your voice. And they'll just slap them in wherever, and there's no punctuation. We've gotten copy before that there is not a single period, question mark, or anything in it. It's just
nowhere for us to breathe.
Yeah, just a flow of consciousness onto the paper.
I got a perfect example of that. One of our sales reps, she sent me a commercial that she recorded on her phone. She goes, "Hey, I need to clean this up a little bit." And there's a section where it was a real estate auction, and she says there's a moment in the commercial where it says all real estate will be sold before the auction. And so she goes, "All right, can you clean this up?" Because again, she recorded it on her phone, so I had to make it sound better. And she goes, "And that section right there where it talks about the real estate being sold, can you put that in italics?" And I just froze. I'm like, how? It's not print. How do I? So I don't know. So, and whenever I'm asking you to write a story, can you yell that part in the story? So I guess.
But you figured it out and you made it work.
And
you
worked.
Put it in italics.
I did put it in italics. There's a little bit of echo thing, but it came out in italics. I just leaned a little bit when I wrote it or read it.
That's right.
There you go.
So, yeah. Never asked a radio guy to put things in italics, I guess.
Yeah.
It froze my brain.
Well, we do have a little time left, and I definitely want to make sure we talk about your podcast, the Nerd Up podcast. And you've told me this before, but let's go ahead and tell me again, what birthed this podcast? I know it was a rather natural progression for you.
Well, it actually, my nerduppodcast.com, great plug right there. Anyway, or you can get it on any streaming service. Anyway, basically, my son and I throughout the years, we always did video gaming together, went to Comic-Cons together, and it was a chance for him and I to bond. So we got started, and just him and I would record, and then I had like a cousin come over, a nephew come over, and so we recorded him, and then next thing I know, like I said, originally it was just my son and I, Isaac, we were just gonna bond, and we were bonding over talking about nerdy things, and it worked perfectly. Well, then I got reached out to my friends in the theater department back when I was in theater at Southern Illinois University. And I said, "Hey, you guys like to talk about movies and video games and everything. Would you guys like to join me?" And so we did that. And for the longest time, it was all of us just basically talking about nerdy stuff. And now it's so hard to get everybody scheduled together that now it's basically Tony and I now. So it's funny because Tony, when I came here to the station about 2, 3 years ago, he said, "Oh, you got a podcast?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah. Would you like to be on it one time?" I said, "Sure." So we kind of just talked about something. Next thing you know, Tony builds a podcast, and that's where we're broadcasting from, is the podcast studio here at the radio station. And he brings in equipment. I've got some equipment. We just kind of mished it all together and said, "Hey, let's have a podcast studio." Here it is.
Yeah, Gil and his buddies were doing the Nerd Up podcast, and then COVID-19 happened, and that just kind of sucked the air out of, I think, everybody's sails.
Yeah.
And so the Nerd Up podcast kind of went dormant for about a year or so.
Almost a year, yeah.
And Gil and I are here. We're seeing each other every day, and we're talking about this nerdy stuff. The new Marvel movies, the new streaming series, whatever. And I go, dude, we need to start recording this and just make this the podcast.
Yep.
And, so we kind of pushed and prodded each other into getting it back on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah.
I think we've done about a show a week now for the last several months.
Yeah. And that he got me pushed back again. COVID kind of hit me, not the COVID itself, but the idea of nobody's out there doing stuff. And I'm like, what do I want to talk about? There was no movies,
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's
that.
when your whole podcast is built around talking about movies
Yeah.
and comic conventions and things like that. It becomes very difficult to do your podcast if none of that stuff is going on.
Right. And so we kept going. And basically now, and one of the things I'm proud of with the podcast is that we're not out there to put things down. There's no negativity involved. There's enough negativity in the world. And here's the thing. If I see a movie and I don't like it, I don't talk about it. Why should I bring it up on the podcast? So it's always things that we do like. I sure will pick apart a few things here and there, but never in a negative manner in the fact that, we hated that. No, we'll just kind of like point out little flaws here and there, but overall, what we talk about is things we love.
Well, my son and I went to see the new G.I. Joe movie, Snake Eyes, at our local theater, and we were talking about that. He goes, "We should be movie critics." And I said, "I don't want to be a movie critic, because then I have to go watch all of the movies, not just the ones I want to see.
Right.
And I have to be mean. I have to be critical.
Yeah.
It's in the title. And I just go watch the stuff and I'm a sucker for I am the reason they still continue to make these Fast and Furious movies. If it is low plot, high speed, high explosion, those are right in my wheelhouse. Because if I'm going to go to the movie and I'm going to plunk down my money for concessions and the like and spend 2 hours, I want to be able to just turn my brain off and go, pretty colors.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's the thing. That's one thing I love about doing the podcast is that every time we get to something we don't like, it's like, all right, let's just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Why? I mean, again, there's so much other negativity out there. Facebook alone is 100% all negative. So why feed that fire?
Yeah, absolutely.
I am, when it comes to movies, the reason organizations like the Asylum are still alive, because that's the stuff that I grew up on. There was, if anybody remembers, you had two things. TNT had Monster Vision with Joe Bob Briggs, and I stayed up every Friday night to watch Joe Bob talking about what he would watch. And then TBS, it was inconsistent, but they had this thing called 100% Weird, and it was all these black and white 50s atomic age monster movies, and I was so down for all of that. Even when I was a teenager, that's what I wanted to watch. Like if it was a guy in a rubber suit or some kind of weird stop motion creature, that's what I wanted. That's the only downside with the Asylum is like CG just doesn't quite have the same charm. I don't think that's just.
I got a friend that's I got a friend that's an independent filmmaker. And one of the things he was talking about is that he's coming up with a movie, and he asked me if I wanted to be in it. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'd love to be in it. And he goes, yeah, well, I'll just let you know, we're kind of paying homage to those old 50s monster movies. I'm like, do you got a guy in a rubber suit? He goes, yep. I said, I'm in. That's all it takes. I'm in. I'll do it. I'll be in the rubber suit if you want. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Well,
100%.
My foray into that type of thing is I was always a huge fan of Mystery Science Theater 3000, that type shit, where they watch those kind of movies and do all of the stuff that you and your buddies were doing, sitting on the couch next to each other, making the smart comments and that kind of thing. So I mean, I think we're all kind of in agreement. I love movies with practical effects, even if the practical effect is maybe not the best. And then there are some spectacular movies that have practical effects that leave you going, wait, how the hell did they pull that off? And so I love those movies.
Well, Frank Zappa's got a song called Cheapness, Cheepnis, and it's about he was watching one of the monster movies and he saw the zipper in the costume of the monster. He wrote a whole song about it. And I'm like, yeah, that guy gets it.
Yeah.
That's exactly. If I can see the zipper, heck yeah, it's even better.
Yep. But I'm a huge Star Trek fan. So you go back and look at the OG original Star Trek with William Shatner, and you occasionally have extras in the background knocking over set pieces because they bumped into the giant boulder.
Yeah.
And it's a cardboard cutout.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I grew up with those episodes of Star Trek. Yeah, God bless that Star Trek. And the one that I really grew up with was Next Generation. And really, even though at the time I thought this was so many light years ahead, if you go back and watch it now, you can spot some of the same kind of cheap, effects that they did.
And I will be the first, because again, Next Generation is my jam. I grew up watching it. It is as close to being sacred as anything is. When the conversation comes up, who's the best captain? I have to default to Jean-Luc Picard.
I do as well, for what it's worth.
That may be sacrilege to some people. I love William Shatner. I'd probably pick Spock over Data if I had to choose, but yeah, and I've gone back and watched some of those, and yeah, I mean, it was spectacular then, but now you look at it and you go,
for its time, I will defend it. It's rather impressive, considering the budget constraints that they had. But yeah, with what we have now, it hurts.
And even most of, I think, the effects that they pulled off really well. Yeah. There's every once in a while one where you go, ooh. And honestly, it typically tended to be when they tried to rely too heavily on CGI.
Yeah.
Because at that time, the computer generated stuff wasn't nearly as polished and refined as it is now. So it almost kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. One of the things that I've seen is some of the digitally remastered versions of the original Star Trek series, where they try to go in and they get rid of the practical effects and they try to do some of it with CGI, and that just does not match.
I've seen those.
It looks worse than it did if you just left the practical stuff in.
Did we learn nothing from George Lucas?
Right? Just leave it alone.
All right. Well, we are coming down to the end of our time, and I don't want to keep you guys too long, but this has been a great conversation. So thanks so much, guys. I know you guys got busy schedules.
Well, again, this was a lot of fun. Very rarely do Gil and I get to be the ones that are getting interviewed.
Exactly.
So, anytime.
I was all set up. I had my computer set up to record you, and I was going to interview, the Matt Schorr is going to be on our podcast again. And then you're what? You're in? Okay.
Well, you're more than welcome to have me back on your podcast. Just so that's out there. Okay.
Definitely. In fact, I'm waiting for that final copy of Moby Dick Back from the Deep, by the way. When you get that out?
Well, the pages are going up on the webcomic right now, so I'm hoping that by the end of the year, it'll be completed.
You got me hanging. I got to see what happens.
What a cliffhanger! Yeah.
What would a horror story do that? What?
Of course not.
So no, honestly, it was an honor to be a guest on your show because, like I said, I'm not used to being interviewed. I don't know how to act.
Yeah,
you're lucky I wore pants.
Well, and see, that's the problem. We're in radio for a living. So, when he said he wanted to video this, I'm like, crap. So that's, I noticed I have the microphone strategically placed right in front of my face. So you still can't hardly see what I look like, which is just fine with me. Pay no attention to the man behind the microphone.
Yeah. So in other words, thank you for having us on.
Well, thank you as well. The times I've been on your podcast, it's been an honor and a treat for me as well. So thanks all around.
Thank you.
Hey, if you haven't already, be sure to visit the official Schorr Manor online t-shirt shop, the purveyors of all things spooky and all things Halloween, as long as it's in t-shirt form. You can find it at mattschorr.net. Just click on shop at the top of the page. And while you're there, be sure to use the promo code journalist and get 10% off of everything in the store. Once again, that's mattschorr.net and click on shop at the top of the page. All right. Thank you, Tony, and thank you, Gil. That was a good time. It was good to reach out to the other side of the journalism spectrum. Don't often get to reach out to the folks over in radio, so that's always a treat, and a treat to talk to the folks doing a podcast just like me, especially a podcast about things that I enjoy, and I'm sure a lot of you guys like: comic books, superheroes, pop culture, movies, no matter how outrageous they may be. Sometimes reality can be a little bit grim, and it's nice to go and enjoy a movie that, as Tony put it, where you just stare and appreciate all the pretty colors up there. So there's something to be said for a little bit of escapism once in a while. So good talk, great talk with you guys, and thank you again. I do have one unfortunate announcement that I need to make. In light of the COVID infection rates, I decided to cancel my convention plans for the remainder of the year. Now, I'm vaccinated, so I'm not so much worried about myself as I am my kids, who are too young for a vaccine right now, and I just don't want to risk bringing something home to them in the meantime. So on the bright side, for all the frustrations that the internet might bring us, it's also allowed us to keep connecting in this way. In light of this pandemic, I'm able to keep connecting with you guys with podcasts, with YouTube, and all kinds of great things. So, it's not all bad. And one day we will get past this. We've made it past every pandemic so far. And in the past, we did it with even less knowledge and understanding than we have now. So, it'll happen. We'll get there someday. Speaking of YouTube, my wife and I actually launched our own YouTube show last month, the Schorr Manor Chronicles, which is all about our spooky adventures centered around Halloween. In our pilot episode last month, we talked about bringing home a 12-foot skeleton from Home Depot. That was exciting. And how we first met, with me making an absolute spectacle of myself, going after a guy for belittling people who liked pro wrestling. I was pretty convinced at the time that I blew whatever shot I might have had with her, but thankfully I was wrong. But it's pretty funny. So, check out the YouTube channel to see that. And so again, speaking of YouTube and all things social media, this podcast is part of the Schorr Manor Studio, which you can find on Facebook and on YouTube. Please look us up there and like, follow, and subscribe. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Schorr Manor and on YouTube by going to tinyurl.com/Schorr Manor YouTube. All of this show's episodes are there in their entirety and now with video. So check that out. You can also sign up for our official newsletter at tinyurl.com/Schorr Manor newsletter, where you'll be the first to hear about announcements, discounts, and giveaways. So don't miss that. And you can look us up on our official website at mattschorr.net, where you'll find this and previous episodes archived. Just click on the podcast link at the top of the page. And finally, if you would like to connect with me directly, you can find me on Twitter at @TheMattSchorr and on Instagram at TheSchorr, or via email at mattschorr@hotmail.com. Also, I decided to go ahead and join the TikTok bandwagon. So if you're on there, you can find me at @1MattSchorr. That's THE1 Matt Schorr. So, connect with me there and, make me feel good about myself. Like people are actually interested in following me on TikTok as well as my other channels. So just, stroke my ego a little bit if you would. But anyway, that brings this episode to a close. So thanks for checking this one out. Thanks again, Tony and Gil. So, like I say, keep reading and keep listening. Thanks.